Welcome to Revenza Tales, where stories of hidden strength and reclaimed justice set hearts ablaze. Like, subscribe, and share to spread this fire across the globe. Drop a comment with your city. How far has Maeve's saga reached? In Atlanta, Georgia, a grandmother's quiet life masks a brewing storm of betrayal and power. I'm Maeve, 69, a grandmother whose world revolved around the gentle rhythm of routine. Every morning, I made coffee in a chipped mug, its fractures charting 20 years of mornings. I watered African violets, their purple flowers a living memorial to my deceased husband, Harold. Through my small kitchen window, I observed the sunrise color the Atlanta morning sky above the city's quiet streets. For 45 years, I gave all of myself to raising Dawn, my only child. Night after night, I cleaned office floors with raw hands to pay for her college aspirations. Weekends, I made cupcakes, their sweet scent wafting through our house, sold to neighbors for added income. I sewed dresses late at night. Every seam a stitch in the life I'd dreamed for her, a life I'd never known. When Dawn wed Dave, a man whose pride hurt more than his few words, I bit back my apprehension. I set the table with my finest china on Sundays, made myself smile, and invited them into my home. Harold died, and I felt an emptiness that I imagined Dawn would come and fill with intimacy. How painfully naive I was. Her visits grew fewer, each one chillier than the last. Phone calls started becoming curt, her tone distant, her excuses a patchwork of evasion. She viewed me as a burden, an anchor weighing down her stylish new existence. The betrayal struck on a gray Thursday in October, heavy with the scent of rain. I'd spent hours simmering Dawn's favorite chicken and dumplings, the recipe unchanged since her childhood giggles filled this kitchen. I draped the table with my hand-embroidered tablecloth, its delicate threads woven when Dawn was a teenager dreaming of prom. Fresh roses, their petals vibrant against the gloom, sat in a crystal vase, a rare splurge. Dave burst in, his boots spreading mud on my hardwood, dropping into Harold's armchair. He turned on the TV, its blare covering up any possibility of greeting, his eyes never looking at mine. Dawn, who was wearing the emerald dress I had purchased for her last Christmas, stood like a statue, her face cold as the autumn breeze. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice cutting, unfamiliar, like that of a stranger. I stood there, the ladle dripping broth on the counter. "Dave and I have made a decision. This house is too large for you." My breathing stopped, a knot forming in my chest. "You can't keep it up by yourself anymore." Her voice cut through the air, crisp, practiced. "We need to find a larger house for when we have children." She hesitated, her eyes downcast. "We located a wonderful retirement development for individuals your age." The room whirled, the floor disappearing under me. This house wasn't merely brick and mortar, it was our past. Here, Dawn learned her first shaky steps, her small hand in mine. Here, we blew out birthday candles, her giggles ringing through these halls. Here, Harold drew his last breath, his hand grasping mine as I made promises of love. Every photo on the mantel, every scratch on the floorboards, spoke of us. "Dawn, this is our home," I begged, my voice shaking, every word a piece of glass. "All our memories are here." "Memories are in the heart, Mom, not on walls," she said, her voice cold, slicing. "The community has activities for people like you." She drew out "like you," as if being my age made me something less. "You'll be better off there with people your own age." Dave's lips curled into a sneer, his eyes darting around the living room like a hunter measuring prey. "It's best for everyone, Mrs. Maeve," he stated, his tone saturated with insincere concern. "We'll deal with all the paperwork, don't fret." My heart splintered, pieces scattering over the table lovingly set. My child, the one I'd lost my youth, my health, my aspirations for, was exiling me. For him, a man who never pretended to hide his contempt, who assumed my house as his spoils. Tears stung behind my eyes, but I forced them back, would not let them witness me shatter. "I need some time to think," I whispered, holding on to what was left of my dignity. "There is no thinking to do," Dawn said, standing, her footsteps brisk and final. "They're coming to value the house next week." They departed, the door clicking shut behind them. My chicken and dumplings sat untouched, steam fading into the cold air. The roses began to droop, their vibrance mocked by the silence. My heart lay in pieces beside the meal I'd poured my soul into. That night, sleep was a stranger. I sat in the dim glow of the living room, staring at the photographs lining the walls. Dawn as a baby, her chubby hands reaching for me. Dawn on graduation day, my ego swelling as she wrapped arms around me. In each photo, I stood there, hugging her, holding her, believing in her. How had my little girl, who used to say that I was her hero, made me garbage? The question haunted me, a nagging pain that kept me awake till morning. The subsequent days were a slide into despair. Dave came back with a real estate appraiser, a man in a gray suit who strode through my house as if it were a model home. He took notes, measured rooms, and grumbled about potential and required renovations. "The pipes are old," he pronounced, his tone clinical, discouraging. "These kitchen tiles are outdated. Everything must be replaced." Those tiles, Harold had installed them himself, sweat on his forehead, when Dawn was 10. Each of them a work of devotion, a vow of a future we created together. To them, they were imperfections to be removed. Dawn lagged behind, bowing with each criticism, her silence more powerful than words. She was stripping our past from us, piece by piece, as if it was nothing. The humiliation further increased when Dawn presented glossy pamphlets for the retirement village. "Look, Mom," she said with syrupy amusement and sincerity. "Beautiful gardens, bingo on Tuesdays, a nurse on duty 24/7. She paused, forcing a smile. "You'll be safer there." Safer? I'd lived in this house for 30 years without incident. I knew every neighbor by name, every creak of the floorboards. My routines, my violets, my coffee, my memories were my safety. But to Dawn, I was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to their perfect future. The final blow came when they arrived with legal papers. Dave walked in, his stance radiating ownership, followed by Dawn and a man in a press suit. "Mrs. Maeve," said the man, who identified himself as their attorney, "we have papers for the transfer of property." "Transfer?" I whispered, which was about all that came out. "I figured you were selling the house," Dawn said. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "Well, Dave and I just decided we were going to keep it," she said, her tone empty. "Better for the family to retain properties." Reality slammed home in a tidal wave. They weren't just kicking me out. They were stealing my home, my inheritance, disguised in false concern. "I'm not signing anything," I told him, my voice gaining strength I didn't realize I possessed. Dave rose quickly, his eyes angry, the hostility he'd kept hidden under Harold's watch now stark. "Ma'am, you're not capable of making decisions anymore," he spat, venom in his voice. "Dawn's your sole heir. She's doing what's best for you. This is my home," I bellowed, my voice off the walls, startling even me. "I'm not going anywhere." "Mom, don't make this more difficult," Dawn whispered, her awkwardness momentary, overwhelmed by determination. "You can't stay alone. You forgot to shut off the gas stove last week." A lie. Cutting and calculated, I'd never forgotten the gas. Dave's smile was victorious, like he'd discovered the ultimate weapon. "She's not well," he told the lawyer. "It's not safe to leave her alone." The lawyer coughed, his eyes ice. "Ma'am, if you refuse to sign on your own, we will seek legal remedies, such as a proceeding for mental incapacity." The room shrunk down, the air thick with betrayal. My own child, the daughter I'd raised with every fiber of my being, prepared to have me declared incompetent. Dave, the man I'd put up with for her sake, threatened me in my own house. I was alone, a 69-year-old woman against their cold calculation. "I need time," I whispered, hardly able to speak, defeat insinuating its way in. "You have 1 week," Dave replied, his voice cold, absolute. "Then we'll do what we have to." They departed, their footsteps ringing out like a death knell. I slumped into Harold's armchair, its cushions still imbued with his smell, and wept as I had not since his funeral. I sobbed for the daughter I'd lost, the home they were tearing away, the life that was unraveling before me. That evening, I stood on the threshold of surrender. Perhaps they were correct. Perhaps I was too old, too weak, too worthless to struggle. But deep inside, a spark of defiance ignited, a flame of dignity that would not be extinguished. I wouldn't let them win and take me away without a fight. The following day, Dawn arrived by herself, her expression a mask of resolve. My heart skipped a beat in hope that she had come to make amends. Naive hope. "Mom, I came to help you pack," she stated robotically, boxes behind her. "We can begin with your clothes." I gazed, trying to find the girl who had wrapped herself around me, only to see a stranger, calculating and cold. "Dawn, listen to me," I implored, my throat rough. "I'm your mother. That's why I'm doing all this," she said, her eyes cast down. "Because I love you and want the best." Love? This was love, taking my home, my dignity, my everything away. She boxed up my life like it was trash for hours. Family pictures, Harold's books, my wedding china. She stuffed them into boxes with rough hands. "This dress is so old, Mom," she exclaimed, holding the black dress I'd worn to Harold's funeral. "You don't need it." She stuffed it into a bag for donations. "Leave it," I begged, my voice cracking. She didn't even hesitate. My hurt, my memories, my life, none of it counted. The last thing was my jewelry box. Inside were my wedding band, the earrings Harold had presented to me on our 20th anniversary, my mother's gold chain. "This jewelry will be more secure in a safe deposit box," Dawn said, putting it into her purse. "It might get lost or stolen at the community." "Those are mine," I cried, reaching for her purse, desperation overwhelming me. "Mom, you're getting upset," she said, voice strikingly calm. "This just proves you can't take care of yourself." At that moment, I knew I'd lost her. The Dawn I raised was no more, replaced by a heartless puppet that danced on Dave's strings. That evening, alone in a half-vacated house, the empty walls sneered at me. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, amidst open cartons and spewed memories. I was invisible, useless, a ghost in my home. The light seeped from the days, Dave arriving every morning like a vulture, with strangers to measure and appraise my life. They talked over me, around me, as though I was already dead. "Needs to pick up the pace," Dave told Dawn on Friday, his tone dripping with urgency. "Movers Monday." 3 days remaining in the house in which I'd raised my daughter, loved my husband, built a life. "What if I don't get packed?" I whispered, my breath hardly audible. "Don't worry, Mom," Dawn said, eyes fixed on her phone. "The movers will do it all. Just grab what's important." Important? How do you distill a lifetime into important things? That afternoon, by myself, I wandered through the house, a ghost among my own recollections. I ran my hand over the walls Harold painted, their gentle blue a testament to his sure hands. I sat in the breakfast chair where we'd had so many breakfasts, the laughter of Dawn once the morning soundtrack. I searched through every drawer, hoping to find pieces of the past. Inside Harold's desk, among paid bills and old letters, I discovered a folder, its leather weathered, bearing his initials and secured with a small lock. Desperation and curiosity compelled me to hunt for the key. I searched his common hiding places, under the lamp, the clock, before I discovered it stuck in an old investment book, underlining a page on property trusts. My fingers shook as I opened the folder. There, a will, 6 months prior to Harold's passing, one I'd never laid eyes on. I caught my breath as I read. Harold wasn't the humble employee I'd thought. For years, he'd invested every penny he could spare. Small houses purchased when they were cheap, shares now worth a king's ransom. I was the only beneficiary. Dawn would get a mere amount, on condition of looking after me with love and respect. He'd witnessed Dave's real character, designing everything to protect me. There was more. The house in which Dawn and Dave resided belonged to us. Its renters rent into an account I never even knew existed. Bank statements showed millions accumulated in 2 years, while I was a poor widow. Harold had huge blocks of stock in Dave's firm, interests in restaurants, businesses, a large tract outside Atlanta now worth millions. All legitimate, careful mine. At the folder's conclusion, a note in Harold's steady hand. "My beloved Maeve, if you're reading this, I'm dead. This treasure is for you, for your sacrifices. I never had any faith in Dave's ambition. Use this well, to defend, not to hurt. Dawn is good but misguided. You possess the tools to protect yourself. Yours forever, your husband. Tears streamed down my face. Gratitude for his wisdom. Sorrow at his loss. Anger at Dawn's treachery. They believed they'd stolen everything from me, not knowing I held their building, Dave's stock shares, city properties. This house was only a fraction of my assets. I didn't sleep that night, not due to grief, but because the flame was burning in me. My brain was active, scheming, computing. Harold had done more than just give me money. He'd given me authority. Now, I would choose how to use it. Monday dawned, a sprinkle of rain pattering on the windows of my Atlanta house. Dawn and Dave arrived early, movers following like phantoms, anticipating me beaten, boxed, set to disappear. I sat instead in Harold's armchair, cradling tea in my broken mug, serene as the center of a tornado. The atmosphere was heavy with foreboding, the smell of damp ground mixing with their apprehension. "Mom, what are you doing?" I snapped, my voice slicing with impatience. "The movers are here." "I'm not leaving," I said, my voice firm, a quiet strength I hadn't experienced in years. Dave moved forward, his smile a thin attempt to cover underlying aggression. "Mrs. Maeve, we've been through this," he said, his voice condescending. "You don't have a choice." I stood my ground, looking him straight in the eye, for the first time in years. "You're right, Dave, I don't have a choice." I allowed the words to hang, weighing heavily with intent. "But neither do you." Something in my tone, a steel beneath the calm, made Dawn move closer, her brow furrowed. "Mom, what are you talking about?" she asked with a tremor in her voice. I sipped my tea, slowly, enjoying their confusion, the power shift palpable. "I found out something interesting about my finances," I stated, my tone controlled, drawing out the truth. "Don't worry, you'll see." Dave's smirk dropped, his eyes narrowing as if I were an Alzheimer's patient telling lies. Dawn's face reflected his, a combination of annoyance and disdain. They believed I was bluffing, a distressed widow clutching at straws. But I was no longer the shaking, sobbing Maeve of 7 days before. Harold's letter had set a fire, and I was holding the match. "Mom, break it up," Dawn complained, her tone laced with irritation. "The movers are here. They have other jobs. Let them go," I told her, my tone calm, unyielding. "Nothing is leaving this house today." Dave leapt to his feet, his mask breaking, his tone low and menacing. "Mrs. Maeve, you don't understand. You don't have a choice in this." "Not so, Dave," I said, standing up slowly from my chair, my movements slow and calculated. "You're the one who doesn't get it." I made my way over to Harold's desk, the worn wood of which was smooth beneath my touch through years of his, and pulled out a small pile of documents, not the entire arsenal, just enough to rattle their reality. "Did you know your apartment, the one you've paid rent on for 3 years, has never been paid to its rightful owner?" Dawn's frown grew stronger, her hands twisting nervously. "What are you saying?" "We pay the management company monthly on time." "Yes," I said, a faint smile on my lips, "and they deposit every cent to me, because I own the whole building." The silence that greeted them was deafening, a chasm engulfing their confidence. Dave gave a nervous laugh, sharp and hollow, his eyes shifting as if on the lookout for an escape. "That's impossible," he replied, his voice cracking. "You exist on a paltry pension, eking out every penny." "I did," I said, the words sweet with triumph. "My husband was much smarter than any of us knew." I gave Dawn one piece of paper, a property deed, its black ink standing out against the cream paper. Her hands shook as she accepted it, scanning the legalese once, twice, 3 times. This can't be real," she breathed, her voice so low she was barely audible, her face going white. "It's as real as your scheme to throw me out of my home," I replied, my voice firm but thick with the anguish of their treachery. "This house? It's the least valuable thing I possess." Dave grabbed the deed from her fingers, his hands closing over it too tightly, his face going gray as he read. "This is a fake," he sneered, his voice trembling, though he attempted to sound confident. "A forged document. You can't deceive us." "Check it out," I told him, my smile growing, a burst of defiance I hadn't experienced in months. "I invite you to call the city records office, Get an attorney. Do what you have to. Dawn slumped onto the sofa, her legs folding up like she'd been punched in the stomach by the truth. Why didn't you ever tell us? She said, her voice tiny, almost like a child's. I didn't know myself until 3 days ago, I replied, my eyes softening but not giving in. Your father preserved the secret to shield me. I stood there, allowing the power of Harold's prescience to settle. What a visionary he was. Dave started pacing, his footsteps heavy, breaths unsteady, a trapped animal feeling the bars closing around it. This will change everything, Dawn, he whispered, his voice low and urgent. If your mother owns the building, she can evict us, throw us out like garbage. And every renter who's paid me on time for 2 years, I interrupted, my voice slicing through his fear like a knife. You can't do that, Dawn said, her voice shattering, tears welling in her eyes. We're family, Mom. Family. I spat, the word tasting bitter on my tongue, slipping out with more venom than I'd meant. Like, when you intended to make me mentally incompetent to steal my house? I took a step closer, my eyes narrowing at hers. Like when you treated my memories, our memories, as trash and packed them away? I fell silent, my voice in a whisper. Like when you stole my mother's jewelry, Dawn? Her tears fell now, not the calculated ones she'd become so proficient at, but real, shaking with true fear. Mom, please, she broke in. We can correct this. It was all Dave's idea. Dawn, Dave bellowed, red-faced, fist-flexed, rage bursting through his smooth veneer. It's true, she continued, paying no attention to him, her voice growing desperate. He talked me into believing you were losing it, that you couldn't take care of yourself. I faced her, my heart aching fresh, yet my face still unmoving. You believed him? I asked, each phrase weighed down by incredulity. You understand your mother, so little that you believe his falsehoods at the expense of your own heart. The movers, standing awkwardly in the doorway, shifted restlessly. Sorry, one said, rubbing his head. Are we hauling the equipment or what? We've got another gig in an hour. Nothing's happening here, I insisted, my voice hard, unshakable. You can leave. The movers looked at each other, shrugged, and trailed out, their boots thudding down the hall. Dave took a step closer, his hostility barely hidden, his eyes shining with a menacing point. This isn't finished, old lady, he growled, his voice low, threatening. We'll contest those papers, show them to be forgeries. Do your worst, I said, unmoved, my own self-assurance a barricade. But you'd better begin saving money for a new home. I waited, allowing the threat to sink in. Next month first, you will be served with an eviction notice. You can't do this to us, Dave roared, his control fracturing, his voice ringing through the house. I can, I replied bluntly, and I will 30 days as the law requires. Dawn stood up suddenly, her hands shaking, her voice desperate. Mom, please, you have to listen, she said, crying hard. Dave said that if I didn't persuade you to move, he would leave me. She gripped her purse, her knuckles white. He said he couldn't bear knowing you were here by yourself, a risk to yourself. And that makes it all right? I asked, my voice level but charged with pain. That makes it right to treat me like garbage, packing up my life without regard, pilfering your grandmother's jewelry? I'll return it now, Dawn offered, digging through her purse, producing the little velvet pouch. It's too late for that, I spoke, my tone icy, though my heart was breaking. Dave's attitude changed, his belligerence yielding to a frantic, whining tone. Mrs. Maeve, let's make a deal, he stammered, his eyes jumping nervously. Dawn's pregnant. Are you going to kick your grandchild out onto the street? The words landed like a gut punch. Pregnant. She hadn't informed me, hadn't shared the happiness I'd longed for as a grandmother. Is this true? I asked Dawn, my voice no more than a whisper. She nodded, sobbing, her hands placed across her still flat belly. I wanted to share it in another way, she said, her voice cracking. I wanted it to be a special surprise, such as the shock of throwing me out of my house, I said, faltering, but Harold's words repeating in my mind. Not to hurt, but to teach and guard. A child didn't take away the betrayal, the humiliation of months, the lies. Congratulations, Dawn, I said, my tone cold level. But that doesn't alter what you did to me. Mom, please, she begged. Her tone cracked with desperation. Consider your grandchild. Do you want him to spend his life not having known his grandma? His grandma was here the whole time. I told her, my gaze direct. You were the ones who wanted to eliminate me. Dave attempted one final manipulation, his voice oily with insincere sincerity. Mrs. Maeve, if you're as wealthy as you say you are, why penalize us? He opened his hands, palms up as if presenting peace. Nous pouvons être unfamiliuni. Unfamiliuni. I sneered, my tone icy with disdain. Chez toi quand tu aimes que tu es malheureuse faire declare incompetent. I advanced, my eyes hard. Chez toi quand tu aimes fate démarre la gargot contre toi. Hush, Dave, I told him, interrupting, my tone possessing an authority I had not realized I had. I've heard quite enough of your falsehoods. The movers had departed, leaving us to a house heavy with tension. Dawn cried silently, her shoulders trembling, her head in her hands. Dave paced back and forth, his gasps labored, his eyes frantic. But I was filled with an odd serenity, with freedom I hadn't experienced for months. Here's what's going to happen, I stated, my voice firm, authoritative. You have 30 days to move out somewhere else. I stopped, watching the words take effect. Don't come here except in a true emergency. And then asked Dawn, her voice hardly above a whisper, her eyes begging. We'll discover if you've learned anything about respect and family, I replied, my voice hard but not unkind. Emotional blackmail, shouted Dave, his face flushed, his fists bunched. Manipulation. I laughed, the sound harsh, ringing through the still room. Such as when you used my supposed mental incompetence to manipulate me? I moved closer, my voice low-biting. Such as when you used my love for Dawn to blackmail me? It's different, he groaned, his voice faint, even to himself. You're right, I smiled toothily. It is different because I really do have the power I'm wielding. Dawn got up from the sofa, her movements lethargic, weighed down by realization. Is there anything we can do to make you change your mind? She asked, her voice shaking, grasping a thread of hope. Yes, I replied firmly, my eyes darting between them. But I don't think Dave is up for it. What do you want? She asked urgently. I want an apology, a genuine, heartfelt apology for all the humiliation you subjected me to, I replied. I want you to say you treated me like dirt. I glared at Dave, and I want you to admit this was all your suggestion. Dave's face contorted in anger, his jaw clenched. I'll never humiliate myself in front of you, he sneered, venom dripping from his words. Then prepare to relocate, I replied, my tone even, absolute. Dawn glared at him, her eyes tearful. Dave, no, she's my mom, she begged, her voice shattering. She's your mother-in-law, he growled, his voice mockingly taunting. We can swallow our pride for our child's sake. No, he bellowed, his voice vibrating through the room. I won't submit to this manipulative old woman. The insult stood there between them, as jagged as a knife. Dawn's jaw dropped open, her eyes wide, at last getting a glimpse of the man she'd wed without the haze of blind passion. Manipulative old woman, I echoed, my tone quiet but reinforced with steel. Fascinating. That's what you truly think of me, Dave. No, Dawn whispered, her voice shaking, her hands quivering. Spies, Dave growled, his control unraveling, his own self bared. A bitter old woman who can't bear her daughter's happiness, inventing this whole conspiracy about money. I approached the desk, moving slowly, and extracted more papers, bank records, deeds to properties, shares of stock. I spread them out on the dining table, each one a fragment of irrefutable fact, their bulk muffling the room. Did I invent these bank statements? I asked, my tone measured but slicing. Did I create these property deeds? I set down another paper, never breaking eye contact with Dave. Did I create these stock certificates? Dawn drew near, her hands trembling as she read the papers, her breath catching. Oh my God, Mom, she breathed, her voice cracking. This is all genuine. Very genuine, I replied, my tone firm, a still victory building inside me. Now you know why your husband is so eager to disprove me. Dawn, don't listen to her, Dave pleaded, his words hysterical, his eyes going wild. She's a liar. She always was a liar. Dave, stop it, Dawn yelled, her voice ringing out with a force I had not heard for years. Just stop. She faced me, great tears streaming down her face, her expression a mask of regret and awareness. Mom, forgive me, she wept, her voice husky, cracking. You're right. I treated you like trash. She gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white. I took your memories, your jewelry, your dignity. Her voice fell to a whisper. And the worst of it is, I did it because he made me believe you were a burden. Dawn, shut up, Dave commanded, his voice snapped, urgent. Don't ever tell me to shut up, she screamed, her eyes blazing with new fire. I'm tired of your manipulations, tired of you using me to hurt my mother. The quiet that followed was complete, a gulf opening between them. For the first time in years, Dawn had decided on what was true, what was right, over control of her husband. Dave's face went hard, his eyes as cold as ice. If you take your mother over me, Dawn, this relationship is over, he stated, his voice low, menacing. Dawn froze, working over the ultimatum, her hands still holding onto the table. Then, to my surprise, she stiffened, her shoulders straightening, her eyes unflinching. Then it's over, she said, her tone clear, firm, one I hadn't heard since she was a child facing off bullies. Dave went still, his mouth twitching, a nervous smile wobbling. You're not serious, he said, his voice wavering. You're pregnant. You can't bring up a child by yourself. I won't be alone, Dawn said, reaching out to me, her eyes softening with something like love, something I hadn't seen in years. I have my mother, but I wasn't quite ready to forgive, not yet. The months of public humiliation, the nights of crying, the loss of my child, no apology could wipe those away overnight. Dawn, I said quietly, my voice firm but laced with honesty. I understand that you're finally seeing things clearly, but this doesn't repair everything. Her face dropped, her eyes sparkling with new tears. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, she said, her voice breaking. Just tell me what to do. I'd do anything, but I'm willing to do whatever it takes. Dave, realizing his control was slipping, got down on his knees, his face a mask of feigned remorse. Mrs. Maeve, you're right. It was all my fault, he replied, his voice oozing crocodile tears. I manipulated Dawn into believing you couldn't care for yourself, bullied her into doing this. He folded his hands together, his eyes beseeching. Please, forgive me. Let me make it up to you. I stared down at him, a combination of satisfaction and revulsion churning inside me. Seeking forgiveness now, Dave? I asked, my voice hard, biting. Now that you see I'm not the helpless widow you ridiculed? I was wrong, horribly wrong, he went on, his act deserving of a stage. Let's be a family. A family? I echoed, my voice hard with contempt. Like when you threatened to have me declared incompetent? I leaned in closer, my gaze boring into his. Like when you accused me of being a manipulative old woman 5 minutes ago? Dave swallowed hard, his pretense crumbling, every word he'd uttered now a noose around his neck. I was angry, he said, his voice small. I didn't mean it. No, I said firmly, my voice ringing with authority. You meant every word. You revealed your true face for the first time. I turned to Dawn, who stood observing the drama in equal measures of shame and pain, her hands still wrapped around the papers. And you, Dawn, I said, my tone condescending but firm. For months you treated me like a thorn, a bother to be cast aside. I didn't let her say anything else. Do you think one apology wipes out all of that? No, she admitted, tears streaming down. I know I can't take back what I did, but I can try to make it right. How? I asked, my gaze scoping her eyes for a glimmer of the daughter I'd raised. By leaving him, she said, her voice firm, her eyes locked on Dave. By leaving the man who led me to betray the only one who's ever loved me without conditions. Dave strode up from the table, his face twisted in anger. You can't be serious, he said, his voice shaking. You're carrying my child. I'm carrying my child, Dawn replied, her hand resting on her belly, her voice fierce with determination. I won't let them grow up watching their father manipulate and mistreat their grandmother. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Dave threatened, his voice low, dangerous. Marrying you has been my worst mistake ever. Dawn spat back at me, her voice a knife, cutting and irrevocable. I took a step closer, speaking quietly but firmly. What are you going to fight with, Dave? I said, my voice nearly matter-of-fact. Because first thing tomorrow, I'm calling your boss's office. I lingered, allowing the threat to take hold. Did you know that I hold sufficient shares in your firm to affect staff decisions? His color drained from his face, his eyes wide with terror. You wouldn't dare, he breathed, his words barely audible. Everything you've done to me? I replied, my tone calm, a storm building within. Certainly I would. That's an abuse of power, he muttered, clinging to straws. Like abusing my mother's love to control me? Dawn demanded, her voice rising, echoing my own. Like abusing my trust to turn me against her? Dave strode toward the door, his gait unsteady, his self-control broken. This does not end here, he growled, his tone heavy with venom. I'm going to annihilate both of you. Go ahead and try, I replied, my tone level unruffled. But you have exactly 1 hour to remove your belongings from my building. 1 hour, he hissed, whirling around, his eyes burning. You said we had 30 days. Where Dawn was with you, I stated, my tone icy definitive. Now that she's gone her own way, you have no business remaining on my land. He closed the door behind him, the house shuddering in his wake. Dawn and I stood there silently. The papers on the table witnessed to Harold's empire I had inherited. Mom, can you ever forgive me? She breathed, her voice only a whisper, her eyes begging. I don't know, Dawn. I replied truthfully, my heart weighted with the pain of her betrayal. You hurt me more than words can tell. I know, she said, drawing out the velvet pouch containing my mother's jewelry, her fingers shaking. I'm going to spend my lifetime making it up to you. She hesitated, her voice cracking. Can I stay here tonight? I have nowhere else to go. I regarded the jewelry, my daughter, pregnant, shattered, alone. My heart melted, just a little, a spark of the love that had never really been extinguished. One night, I told her, my voice firm but not ungentle. Tomorrow, we begin to discuss how you'll regain my trust. She nodded, tears of thankfulness streaming down her face. Thank you, Mom, she said, her voice raw. I promise I'll make things right. Promises are fragile, easily broken. The real test would come with time. The next few days were a delicate dance of tension and hope. Dawn stayed in her old bedroom, untouched since her wedding, its walls still papered with her teenage dreams. We moved through the house like polite strangers, our conversations limited to necessities. Breakfast, the weather, her morning sickness. But I watched her closely, observing each movement, each utterance. She washed dishes straight after eating, a tiny act of thoughtfulness I had not seen in years. She had a tidy room, ironing her clothes neatly. She even started doing chores, dusting the shelves, sweeping the porch, without being asked. Each one a quiet appeal, a step towards forgiveness. Hope trembled, weak but unextinguishable, like a light in a tempest. On the third morning, while I watered my violets near the kitchen window, their leaves sparkling with the morning light, Dawn came with a cup of tea. Mom, may we talk? She asked, her voice uncertain, her eyes darkened with fatigue. I nodded, not moving from the plants, allowing silence to draw her out. I've been ruminating a lot the last few days, she stated, plopping down in the chair where Dave used to sit like a monarch. Everything, what I did, what I said. She hesitated, her voice shaking. It wasn't just Dave who transformed me. She took a trembling breath. I let him transform me. Her words hung there, naked and true. I decided to believe his lies instead of my own heart. I looked at her, my gaze raking hers, and seeing the burden of her regret. Dark shadows under her eyes, her face gaunt in spite of her pregnancy, a sign of sleepless nights. And why do you suppose that occurred? I asked gently but insistently. Dawn sighed, her hands clasped in her lap, her fingers curling restlessly. Because it was simpler to lay the blame at your doorstep than accept the truth that I'd married the wrong husband. Her candor took me aback, a blunt confession where I had prepared myself for excuses. When Dave began complaining about your visits, I knew deep down he was being unfair, she whispered. but it was simpler to call you clingy than to admit him selfish. She lowered her eyes, her hands shaking. When he pushed the concept of the retirement home, I knew it was wrong, but he made me think that it was for your safety. She stopped talking, her gaze locking onto mine, her expression full of pain. I wanted to believe him because it meant I wouldn't have to face the actual problem. And what was that problem? I questioned, already knowing but needing to hear her say it. Because I married a man who doesn't respect my family, she said, her voice cracking. Who doesn't respect me and who will never change. The days following Dawn's revelation were an agonizing unfolding of truths that sent shivers down my spine. She sat beside me at the kitchen table, the morning light casting shadows on her drawn face. Her voice, soft and hesitant, told the story of the prison Dave had constructed around her. He'd cut her off from friends, whispering that they were poor influences, envious of her marriage. He dictated every penny she spent, informing her that women were too emotional to manage money. He'd gotten her to leave her job as an accountant, telling her real wives worked full-time at home. Each revelation was a knife, cutting deeper than the last. And you never thought to tell me? I asked softly, but with a heavy hurt, my arms folded around my cracked mug. Dave said you wouldn't get it, Dawn said, staring at the table, following the grain of the wood. He said you'd tell me to leave him. She hesitated, her voice cracking. He didn't want any outside interference in our marriage. My heart hurt. My daughter had endured in secret, locked in a cage I had not noticed. I had believed she was content, her life shining and flawless, and she was suffocating. When she'd attempted to connect, Dave had already poisoned her, telling her I was the villain. 2 weeks since he'd stormed out, the telephone rang, breaking the tenuous peace of our morning. Dawn replied, her face going white, her hand shaking as she held onto the receiver. It's the building manager, she breathed, hardly audible. Dave's at the lobby. He's insisting on coming up. She swallowed hard, her eyes wide with terror. He says he has a right, because he's still my husband. My heart racing, a combination of fury and determination rising inside me. Tell him what else? I asked, my tone even though a tempest raged within. He's shouting that he's going to call the police, she replied, her voice trembling. He's telling them I'm kidnapped, that you're keeping me hostage. I rose, moving stiffly, methodically, a serenity I didn't know I had enveloping me. Tell the manager I'm on my way downstairs, I instructed, putting down my mug. Mom, he's angry, Dawn cried, her voice escalating into hysteria. We don't know what he's capable of. Exactly, I said, locking eyes with hers, a silent strength in my stare. That's why I'm going down there. Dave stormed through the lobby of my building, a whirlwind of fury, his voice thundering as he loomed over the shaking manager. That deranged old bat has my wife kidnapped, he bellowed, his face flushed, his breath reeking of booze. I want you to call the police immediately. The manager, a slim young man little more than out of his 20s, trembled behind his desk, his hands scrabbling for papers. Good day, Dave, I said calmly, interrupting his rant like a knife through silk. He turned, his bloodshot eyes fixing on mine, his face twisted with rage. You, he spat, taking one step towards me, his fists doubled up. Give me my wife back now. Dawn is where she needs to be, I replied, my tone unshaken, my footing anchored like an oak. And if you don't get off my property right now, I'll be the one to call the police. This is not your property, he bellowed, his voice rebounding off marble walls. You're a liar, a senile old woman. I took out my phone from my pocket, my action slow, deliberate, and dialed my attorney, Victoria, speaking on speakerphone. Attorney Victoria. I spoke my words calm but authoritative. It's Maeve. I hesitated, allowing the silence to mount, Dave's eyes squinting. I have a displeased man here who won't leave my building. I looked at him, my eyes unwavering. Could you verify that I am the rightful owner? Certainly, Mrs. Maeve. Victoria's voice echoed out, crisp and commanding, listing the address of the building and my exclusive ownership. The manager's eyes shot wide open, his fright turned to awareness. Dave stood stock still, mouth agape, bravado disintegrating like crumpled leaves. Anything else I need to explain, Dave? I said, letting the phone drop with a soft clunk. He growled, This isn't over, but he hesitated, his voice wavering, his eyes flicking to the door. You're right, I replied, my voice dripping with subtle menace. Because tomorrow, I'll call your boss at the company. I waited and let the threat settle. And the next day, to the bank that owns your car loan. I smiled weakly, a glint of pleasure in my eyes. Contacts are handy when you've got money. Dave stumbled out, his shoulders hunched, his threats hollow. But I knew he'd return. Guys like him hold on to their poison like a lifeline. 2 months passed, and the trial hung over us like a thunderstorm, dark with the threat of justice. Dave had acted on his threats, suing for parental alienation and financial manipulation, claiming full custody of Dawn's unborn child. I dressed in my best black suit that morning, its fabric cool against my skin, a silent shield. Dawn entered my room, her eyes red with tears, her hands trembling. Mom, I'm scared, she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. What if the judge believes him? She clutched her belly, 5 months pregnant, her fear palpable. What if he takes my baby away? I wrapped my arms around her, her body trembling against mine. The first embrace we'd shared in months. That's not going to be, I told her, my own voice steady, a promise. We have the truth. She wept on my shoulder, but I held her firm, a boulder to her tempest. The Atlanta courthouse was thick with expectation, the wooden benches groaning beneath the push of spectators. Dave stood in front of me, between 2 lawyers whose press suits yelled money he couldn't pay for. His eyes blazed with old hatred, but I looked back at him calmly unyielding. Dawn sat next to me, her purple maternity dress embracing her pregnancy, her tightly clasped hands in her lap. I had on Harold's anniversary earrings, their weight telling me of his love, my power. We were prepared. Dave's attorney began with a poisonous barrage, portraying me as an angry mother-in-law armed with a new fortune to break up a blissful marriage. He talked of manipulation, blackmail, a poisonous woman who couldn't relinquish her daughter. His words were an act, everyone designed to hurt, but they rolled off me like rain on glass. Victoria, my attorney, stood with poised precision, her presence taking command of the room. She shared evidence with scalpel-like precision, text messages wherein Dave had abused Dawn, calling her weak, useless, recordings of his menacing voice, low and threatening, ordering her to evict me from my house or be abandoned, depositions of neighbors who'd overheard his bellowing arguments, his mean words ringing out over thin walls. Each of them constructed a case as strong as the house he attempted to take. But the atmosphere changed when the judge, a man of gray hair and keen eyes, looked up from his bench, his eyes locking with mine. Mrs. Maeve Williams, he questioned, his tone dripping with incredulity, his gaze narrowing. Yes, Your Honor, I answered, confusion rumbling in my breast. He took off his glasses, looking at me as though he saw a specter. Did you work in the family court 30 years ago? My heart froze, time collapsing inward. Yes, Your Honor, I stated, my tone firm even as memory settled heavily upon me. I was a secretary to Judge Miller. The judge edged forward, his expression relaxing, a glint of recognition in his eyes. You assisted me when I was an intern, he stated, his tone soft but strong. You showed me how to sort case files, fetched me coffee during night shifts. He paused, his eyes warm with recollection. You were considerate when others treated me as though I was invisible. The courtroom grew still, a collective breath held. Dawn's grip on my hand tightened, her eyes wide with shock. Dave's face went white, his lawyer's hands halting in midair. I saw it then, the tentative young intern, David, behind the judge's weathered visage, his sincere smile unfaded by years. David, I whispered, tears spilling into my eyes, a torrent of recollections bursting open. Of course, I remember you. Judge David Morales smiled, a brief glimmer of the boy I remembered. I never forgot your kindness, Mrs. Maeve, he stated, his voice firm but warm. You said I would be a fine judge when I was doubting myself. Dave's attorney stood up, his voice cutting with desperation. Your Honor, this is a conflict of interest. There is no conflict, Morales declared firmly, unyieldingly. There is only justice. He leaned forward, his gaze reading over the evidence before him. And after hearing all the evidence, it's obvious Mr. Dave Foster has been the sole manipulator in this tale. The decision fell like a thunderbolt. Dave lost all rights over the unborn child, was forbidden from contacting us, and was required to pay legal fees and emotional compensation. His lawyer blanched. Dave's eyes flared with helpless fury. But I felt solely peaceful, the power of the truth on my side. Outside the court, with clouds-heavy skies above, Dawn hugged me like she hadn't since we were kids, her arms firmly wrapped around me. "Mom, how is it that the judge recognized you?" she asked with her voice full of awe. "Life comes in circles, honey," I replied with a soft tone, a smile pulling at my lips. "Kindness always returns when you expect it least." 6 months passed, and my granddaughter Serenity was born, her small wails a song that made every struggle worth it. Dawn came into her own as the mother that I knew she could be, loving Serenity with a passion and a determination that brooked no opposition. We rocked her one afternoon in the garden, the violets abloom bright under the Georgia's sun, when Dawn looked at me with eyes gentle with promise. "Mom, did you really forgive me?" she queried, her voice shaking. I regarded her, this woman who had emerged through agony, who had found her strength, her heart again. "I forgive you, Dawn," I told her, my voice firm, kind. "But most importantly, you've also learned to forgive yourself." That evening, drinking tea in my cracked mug, I remembered Harold's letter, the words branded on my soul. I'd used his power as he intended, not to destroy, but to protect, to teach. Dawn had learned that love is respect, not control. I'd learned it's never too late to reclaim your worth. 5 years later, my life was a tapestry of joy I'd never imagined. Serenity, now 4, with Dawn's bright eyes and my stubborn streak, tore through the garden, chasing butterflies with wild laughter. "Grandma Maeve, look what I found," she exclaimed, grasping a yellow flower, its petals rumpled in her small fist. "It's lovely, my love," I said, picking her up in my arms, kissing her pink cheek. "Can we put it in the vase with the rest?" Dawn smiled from the kitchen, her hands covered in flour, which she wiped across her apron, her laughter ringing out like she used to when she was a child. She'd gone back to school, now an accountant at a thriving local firm, her confidence reborn. "Mom, a letter came for you," she said, handing me an elegant envelope, its wax seal gleaming. It was from Home and Dignity, the foundation I'd founded with Harold's inheritance. A refuge for older women facing familial abuse or abandonment, it had grown from my pain into a beacon of hope. "They're inviting us to the opening of the 3rd house," I told her, pride welling up in my chest. 15 more women will have a home. More than 50 women had rebuilt their lives with us, some, like me, betrayed by those they trusted, others by themselves, their lives the mirror of my own. The doorbell chimed softly, a mellow ring through the afternoon. Dawn came back, a knowing smile on her lips. "Mom, you have a visitor," she said, moving aside. Judge David Morales stood before us, his silver hair gleaming in the sun, his wife Elena beside him, her silver locks lovely, her smile friendly. "Mrs. Maeve," David welcomed, his tone as friendly as the boy I'd known. "I'd like you to meet my wife, Elena." "It's an honor," Elena said, clasping my hands, her bright blue eyes shining with sincerity. "David's spoken so much about you. He says you defined his career." "He exaggerates." I laughed, my heart brimming with emotion. "Not at all," David replied, his smile fixed. "The Retired Judges Association would like to recognize you for your efforts with the foundation." He stopped, his eyes aglow with respect. "Your tale inspired us to reconsider justice, the kind that exists past laws." "That's not necessary," I started, my voice gentle, humble. "Yes, it is," he said firmly but kindly. Once they'd gone, I sat with Dawn on the porch, the evening air warm, Serenity playing with her dolls at our feet. The garden was a riot of color, my violets doing well under my attention, a living connection to Harold. "Do you know what I most admire about you, Mom?" Dawn asked in a quiet, musing tone. "What?" I asked, turning to her, interested. "That you never let bitterness consume you," she said, our eyes locking. "After everything I put you through, You kept your heart open. Oh, I got bitter, I confessed, my voice low and sincere. There were nights when resentment ate me alive, gnawed at my soul. I trailed off, my eyes shifting to the violets. But your father's letter taught me something profound. What was that? She asked, leaning in, her hands folded. True power is not revenge, I told her. It's taking pain and turning it into something that heals others. Dawn nodded, her eyes shining, her own transformation a reflection of my own. She now worked at the foundation, telling her story to support young women stuck in abusive relationships. Did you ever discover what became of Dave? She asked, her voice curious but unattached. Victoria told me he relocated to another city, remarried, I said, my voice steady. I hope he learned something, but honestly, it's no longer my concern. You're not curious? She asked, a hint of a smile on her lips. No, I replied firmly, the weight lifted. Some people come into your life to teach you things. I paused, our eyes locking. Once you've learned, you release them. Serenity ran to me, her cheeks flushed, her eyes sparkling. Grandma, read me the story of the courageous grandma, she insisted, getting into my lap. She loved that one. A kid's adaptation of my battle, in which I possessed magical abilities to defend our family against an evil dragon, assisted by a wise judge. Again, I playfully teased, pushing a curl behind her ear. Don't leave out the judge section, she instructed, her tone firm, her small hands clinging to my shirt. As I told the story, my words conjuring magic for her, I was amazed by fate's peculiar waltz. I had lost it all, my daughter, my house, my pride, to find my own strength. I had bottomed out, only to stand with a power I did not know I possessed. And they lived happily ever after? Serenity inquired, her eyes big, her tone full of hope. Yes, my love, I replied, my eyes sweeping across Dawn laying the table for dinner, the garden in bloom, Serenity snug in my arms, the letter from the foundation promising yet more lives transformed. I did. That evening, after bedding Serenity, I sat in my armchair, a cup of tea cradled in my hands. Letters from the women we'd assisted littered the table. A 75-year-old who mustered strength to deal with her abusive son, a 60-year-old who regained possession of her home from grasping grandchildren. Each tale was a strand in a tapestry made from my suffering, a mission born from betrayal. Dawn appeared beside me, her own tea steaming, her presence a subdued solace. What are you thinking about, Mom? She asked gently, her voice one of familiarity. Your father, I told her, my tone heavy with emotion. How proud he'd be of what we've created here together. I know he's watching us, she whispered, touching her hand to mine. And I'm proud of you too, I added, my gaze locking with hers. Of the woman you've become. I learned from the best, she replied, squeezing my hand, her smile warm and true. We sat in silence, the distant thrum of Atlanta an echo into the night, our garden a refuge of peace. I love you, Mom, Dawn whispered, her voice barely above a breath, filled with the love I'd believed lost. And I love you, honey, I said, my heart full. I've always loved you, even at your worst moments. A mother's love lasts, greater than hurt, deeper than betrayal, more powerful than any fortune. I slept peacefully that night. No nightmares, no terror, only the serenity of a second chance well spent. My hurt had turned into purpose, my shame into strength, my tale a beacon of hope for others. It is never too late to retell your story, translating wounds into wisdom that lights the path for others. Thank you for joining Revenza Tales. If Maeve's victory inspired you, like, subscribe, share. Would you hold strong or seek peace? Comment your city. How far has this reached? Thanks for the super support for more tales. 2 great stories connected at the end. Don't miss them. With love, till next time.